The Town of Caroline draft zoning law includes a water resources and flooding overlay district. The purpose of that district is to alert owners and developers to critical water resources on a parcel. That district is shown here with the diagonal blue lines. And this map provides a centralized location that highlights all the important water areas in Caroline. It has three main parts to it, and so let's go through those pieces. First, it's made up of flood zones. That is, of course, areas that are prone to flooding. Also wetlands. And finally, riparian areas, which are the areas near streams. Flood zones are the 100-year flood areas as mapped by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. The draft zoning law maps are based on the newest 2022 flood maps that are not generally available yet, so folks who are more familiar with the old 1980s maps may see that there are some differences in the overlay district from what they might have expected. The draft zoning law does not add or change any regulations regarding flood zones, and the existing regulations for flood zones are in a town local law. The town has had a local law on flood damage prevention for some time. The most recent version dates from 2021. And the important points are that that law does not prohibit building in a flood zone, but does set standards so that buildings and utilities aren't damaged by floods, and also sets standards so that whatever building is done does not make flooding worse. Wetlands are areas that are covered by water for some portion of the growing season. Wetlands, since they're not always wet, sometimes can be hard to determine. So the exact determination of the area of a wetland is done by an examination of the plant types and soil types. Any wetland that is 12.4 acres or larger is regulated by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and smaller wetlands are regulated by the federal government. There is no local law concerning wetlands, and the draft zoning law does not add or change anything to the existing state and federal regulations. It should be noted that in general, those state and federal regulations prohibit building in wetland areas. Riparian areas, as mentioned earlier, are the areas next to streams. There are two types of streams, of course, perennial streams and intermittent streams, and they are handled somewhat differently in the zoning law. Perennial streams have a two-part protection zone made up of a riparian buffer area, which is the 50 feet or so closest to a stream, and a buffer setback area, which is the next 50 feet further out from that. The way this looks in practice is as follows. Again, here is a stream bed, here's the edge of the stream, the 50 feet outside from that is the riparian buffer area, and the next 50 feet or so out is the buffer setback area. As highlighted in this figure, if there is a steep slope or a wetland inside one of these areas, the width of the area is increased to account for that. The reason for this is that a steep slope or wetland does not do the same job in terms of filtering or otherwise protecting the water source that flatter land does. Intermittent streams, as we said, were covered somewhat differently. They have a single one-part riparian buffer area protection zone that is a fixed width of 50 feet. The protections in the draft zoning law are new because there's no current law governing riparian buffer areas. The details of the regulations are found in the draft zoning law, but as a quick overview, in the riparian buffer area, again, the part that is closest to the stream, almost no building is allowed, and in the part further out, the buffer setback area, some amount of building, such as decks, gazebos, and playgrounds, is allowed. There's some other important things about the draft zoning law regarding the water resources overlay you should be aware of. One is that existing uses of land are grandfathered. This means that if there's a land use taking place inside the riparian buffer area, it will still be allowed to continue even if it's in conflict with the regulations for that area. Agricultural uses, that is by a farm operation, are exempted from the requirements of the water resources overlay. And of course, it is possible that a stream or something has shifted over time. And if that has been the case, an applicant can provide a survey, and based on that survey, as required, regulations may be waived. The detailed regulations are Section 5.3 in the revised draft zoning law. That's text of that section has been posted on the Zoning Commission webpage, as well as a paper that goes through this overlay in much greater detail than we've done in this slideshow. To get to the Zoning Commission webpage, you can either do a web search on that webpage or go to the townofcaroline.org homepage. Under Offices and Committees, you can choose the Zoning Commission. And on that page, there's lots of different information, but in particular on the Water Resources and Flooding Overlay District, if you just scroll down a little bit, here is a link to the regulations proposed for that district. There is a paper that goes through this overlay district in great detail. And then a link to this video, as well as a video to how to use the County GIS mapping system.